Hey, Pro Organizers. My name is Melissa Klug, and you are listening to the Pro Organizer Studio podcast. Professional organizing changed my entire life. After 20 years of working at huge companies, I started working for myself. I opened a professional organizing business, grew it to six figures, and I never looked back. Now I get to spend all day, every day, teaching organizers around the world how to find clients, how to market and sell yourselves, how to turn this business into what you want it to be. Whether you have been in business for 15 minutes or 15 years, you have a home at Pro Organizer Studio. I'm excited that you're here. Let's get started. Hey, organizers. Here is part 2 of my conversation with Dr. Camilla Moore on burnout and stress. I hope you enjoy it. Have a great day. Do you have, in the work that you do and in the people that you work with, do you have kind of a hierarchy of, it's physical first, it's emotional? Like, do you have anything where you just go kind of like, these are the non-negotiables, and then these are the things that we want you to do after that?
Yeah. So this goes along with my board certifications in lifestyle medicine. And so lifestyle medicine has 6 pillars of health. That's what we start with. And stress management being one of them. But the other is nutrition, exercise, sleep, limiting things like alcohol,
Mhm.
and then being together, like
Okay.
relationships, those things. And so as we go through, like we talk about all 6 of these things because from the research, we know that these are the things that help build us to be the healthiest being that we can be. And that helps support, our stress response. And, our stress response is really supposed to be a short-term thing. And there's three terms that are often used interchangeably that it might be helpful to just break down so that we understand what people are saying. And there's stress, there's chronic stress, and there's burnout.
Yeah, let's talk
So
about it.
so stress is a short-term thing, right? It is you see the lion, it comes in, you say, "Oh my goodness," and you run away and that's it, and then you recover. Or, in a much more 2024, like you're driving down the interstate, someone cuts you off, you white knuckle it, but they keep going and then you calm down and you're okay, right? So during that stress response, our body starts getting ready to go. So we have glucose mobilization. So we have sugar going to our muscles. We have increased heart rate. We have increased breathing rate. We have, this focus in our cognition, like we are ready to go. That is, and then that stressful experience subsides and we recover from that immediately. It may take a little bit of time, but we're able to recover. And then it's an event and not a situation. Chronic stress is when you have repeated stress. So if you were to take that drive to work, you got cut off, you had that stressful experience, and then you had to go into the office. And in the office, you had clients that were canceling, or an employee that wasn't there, or a crisis with a payment. And all of a sudden, you didn't have time to recover before the next wave of stress came in. And so it just compounds over the hours, over the days, over the weeks, over the months, and over the years. And so this is where we see our chronic diseases really living, is in this
Okay.
chronic stress. Not in the acute stress, but when it starts to accumulate and we don't have enough energy and we don't have the space to actually recover from it. Then our body is still trying to fight the stress, but also it's a load to just try to recover from it. So burnout is an environmental issue. Burnout is when we have been giving way more than what we are getting back. And so it speaks to whether we feel seen, whether we feel heard, whether we feel valued, whether what we are doing matters. And so when you talk about, a lot of the professional organizers were other professions where they got burnt out. These were the reasons they left because, like, they got to the point where they say, well, what's the point of me being here? And so when we look at the symptoms of burnout, cynicism, lack of motivation, fatigue, exhaustion, like it is because you are so worn down from giving of yourself and not getting anything back. That's why that charges is so important, because if you look at it in terms of energy, then you can really see where your risk level is. And so there's a lot of overlap between chronic stress and burnout because the two often go hand in hand. But when we break it down and we look at like how can we address these two things, they're very different. And so we address them differently. So with the stressful part, with the stress part, that's where like the non-negotiables come in, where like, okay, we have to get some exercise in, we have to get our nutrition in because we have to support the biological part of our being in order to be able to recover.
Right.
And so then when we're talking about burnout, we're talking really about things like purpose, the things that fill you up, the things that are draining you, like those types of things are really what we are looking at with burnout. So the two go together, but we look at them separately and then they work together so that you can at the end be a little bit more sustainable.
Do you see people that are able to pretty successfully recover from burnout, or is it a really long
Yeah,
process
it's,
that I
yeah, I mean, it varies because it varies, I hit the wall because what happened in my story was it was like the COVID, and like there was just no way. I had a newborn.
yeah.
I was working through COVID. Like there was just nowhere to go. And I felt it happening. Like in hindsight, you know, I just remember there was this one day that I remember so vividly. I was like driving to work and it was early morning. It was like 7:15. It was in a city and like it was quiet the way the city is. And I just had like every fiber in my being. I was sitting at a stoplight like, just wanted to turn around and go home. Like, and I've never had that feeling before, but it was so visceral, and I didn't. I did what we are trained to do as professionals. I put my big girl pants on,
Yeah.
and I took a breath, and I
I
showed up.
just sucked it up and went to work.
But I remember, like, that piece I just remember feeling, like, a little piece of myself get lost that day, and, like, once that started to happen, it just got easier and easier for that to happen over and over again, and until one day, like, I literally couldn't get out of bed.
Yeah.
And so, it really matters, like, how long you have been in this, but there's a physiological recovery time because you also have, like, this chronic stress component typically, but then there is the figuring out of, like, well, what do I want to do, and what am I going to do? If, like, this is a situation and environment that isn't very good for me, what is? And so that can take some time, but it can take a while to recover because it can take a while to get there because especially women tend to just keep going and going and going and
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
And that's where, until you crash or you realize, like, I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't even know what I want to do anymore. And you reach this kind of emotional crossroads too.
Yeah. Well, I think that we're doing a much better job now in the last, we'll call it decade or whatever. You probably have actual scientific information about how long it's been, but talking about mental health and talking about, when I think about clients I work with, people are very open now to say, I have depression, I have anxiety, I have ADHD, I have like we're not worried about that anymore. I was telling someone the other day, I'm like, oh my gosh, I upped my Lexapro dosage. Like, I
It's
I
so
don't
much
mind
better.
talking about that, right? Because
Yep.
these are just actual things, right? I would take a ibuprofen if I had a headache, right? So, but we are getting a lot better about talking about these things, and burnout is one that, we might not talk about as much because I think people are just like, "Oh, well, I'm just tired or I'm stressed or whatever," but that chronic stuff really starts to weigh on your body, and none of us are getting younger.
No, and, there's also this shift and that brings up a big point too about mental health in general and where therapy plays a huge role in this
Yes.
because a lot of times we have just been going and going and going, and we haven't really understood the deep intention behind it. And so looking at that with a therapist is super important to understand what makes us tick, for better or worse, what has made us tick. And when we go through, one of the exercises we do in the SMART program is we do it's called the root fear exercise, right? And so what you're really under every stress is a fear. And so what we want to do, right? Because stress response is a protective mechanism. Like it is a survival. We got this far because we had it. And it will always be our default. But understanding what are you afraid of that you are protecting is really, really important. And that can sometimes that is just, as easy as going through this and sitting with it. And that's where mindfulness and meditation can come in because it gives us an environment where we can be curious about these things rather than being judgmental about them with ourselves. And this is where we bring in self-compassion and empathy and those types of things. But if you never had that as a child, if you were never taught that, if that was is foreign to you, then we're starting, at ground zero. And that means working with a therapist to really get to the root of that. And so those things go hand in hand.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your program. So just like, because I
Mm.
just know everybody, almost everyone that I work with, including myself, really these are things that we struggle with, but
Yeah.
we maybe don't talk about quite as much. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how you do it.
Gladly, thank you. Yeah, so that I do 2 things. 1, I teach the SMART program online, and 2, I work one-on-one with clients.
Yeah.
And then I do workshops, like I do online workshops and local workshops and some consulting, but those are the 2 big things. And the SMART program stands for Stress Management Resiliency Training, and this was developed by the Benson Henry Mind Body Institute at Mass General and Harvard Medical School. And so the reason why I love this program is because it's actually been researched.
Yes.
And it has so
I,
we
mean,
have
I haven't heard
evidence.
of Harvard, but it's probably pretty good.
It's okay.
It's like on the way.
Um, but they, and I love the group of people at Benson Henry, like, they're just kind-hearted, good people. But the program was, it's traditionally 8 weeks, and you had to go through the cohorts. But what I did was I recorded the whole thing, I put it online, and then you can come in where you are. So if you miss a week, you can jump in the next week. And so it makes it very accessible for folks. But the videos are like 5 to 15 minutes. Like, they're short, listen to them on your way to work. So it's very accessible. But what we teach is really all of the fundamentals. So what I say is, like, if you don't know where to start, this is where you start,
Yeah.
because it teaches you all the fundamentals of stress management and burnout in an evidence-based component. And so and I love it. I could teach it forever. The one-on-one with clients is we do a lot of the SMART program, but it's much more tailored to what exactly that one person, right? It's the benefit of just having one-on-one with people. But those are the 2. So the research that we have on SMART program is pretty amazing. They did a clinical trial. They had 40% decrease in physical symptoms. So that means, like, had stress headaches, like
Sure.
blood pressure went down, like actual physiological symptoms. And then we had most people had about 30% less stress,
Good
33%
deal.
less stress. Yeah, over just a few weeks. Like, that's not the ongoing. And so when you put that together with other research that we know about programs like this, the long-term effects, those effects actually continue to increase over time with the practice. So this is your jumping off point, and it's all remote. So
Well,
that's
I
what
like
we have.
something that you said that I don't think we are, well, I mean, depending on how you look at it, we should get to talk about it too much or not enough, but evidence-based, these are things I think now, like, we live in such, I was joking the other day about, I was talking to someone about ADHD, the rise in
Mhm.
ADHD diagnoses, and I said either an actual diagnosis or a TikTok diagnosis. And I think, like, right now, because we live in such a, like, TikTok and reels dominate our life, right? And you just go, "Oh, I'm getting these little snippets from these people." And somehow I have decided, because they're giving me this snippet that sounds good, I go, "Oh yeah, they must know what they're talking about." What if they don't? Like,
What if they don't?
it would be like me going on, I could start giving you medical advice. Guess what? I just make people's underwear drawers prettier. I should not be giving anyone medical advice.
Mhm.
So I like what you're saying about this is a scientifically based
Yeah.
program to actually work on stress and burnout and all of those things. It is based on clinical data, actual results, that type of thing. It's you need to know who you're getting things from, whether it's
Well,
me
and
or you or other people.
you don't wanna waste your time.
No,
Like, that's the thing. Like, we
we
are
don't
busy
have time to
people, we
waste.
don't.
That's why we're talking about this. We're busy.
And that's what I mean. Like, I think we owe it to ourselves to at least be exposed to it, and that's why, like, the conversations that you're talking about that we're having now, I can't wait for the next generation and see what they do, because 'cause we're just talking about it and implementing things, but, like, what happens, in, like, with the generations to come. And
Yep.
you mentioned, like, neurodivergence, and that's a whole other thing too, is that sometimes it is entirely possible that a lot of your struggles, especially women, could be perimenopausal. Like, it
Yep.
could be hormonal. Like, exactly. Like, that's,
Me.
so you look at, yeah, you look at, the people the women that I work with are usually 40 plus, like they're, my age. And like, that's one of the conversations is because we have such a deficit in menopause literate doctors in the United States, we have a ton of women that have also not been appropriately diagnosed and treated for menopause symptoms. And it's a symptom based diagnosis. So that is, and if you look at the symptoms of burnout and you look at the symptoms of perimenopause, they are very similar, right? So lack of motivation, some cynicism, brain fog, fatigue, exhaustion, not being able to sleep, like they are very similar. And so, unless you are able to go to a menopause literate doctor, have your blood drawn, get on, have a treatment plan put in place, and maybe have some hormone replacement therapy that could help, then you may be misdiagnosed with something else, or you could be missing it, or you could be just miserable for no reason.
Yeah.
And that's where I do appreciate the social media because you have some perimenopause doctors that are on there that are
That
just
are
like
great.
blowing
Yes.
up. You Vonda
Yeah.
Wright, Dr. Vonda Bright, and I'm forgetting her last
All right,
name,
Claire Haber.
Mary Claire Hay, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what they are doing for women over 40 is amazing, amazing.
Yeah.
But that's part of it, right? So you got to look at that and say, okay, maybe this is a normal part of life. In that age group, though, you have to, again, go back to that study from work and say, it is so easy to just say that you're overwhelmed and overworked and tired because you are the sandwich generation, because you are taking on all of these things. But you have to get to the root cause of things, whether that is your stress or whether that is your brain fog. You have to do it. And like those are the two main pieces. Like, is it burnout or is it like a hormonal change and
Right.
perimenopause? The perimenopause is not fun.
No, it's not great. It's not delightful. I actually just recorded a podcast about it the other day. These will probably come out. I'll probably make them come out around the same time because, and that is, kind of the demographic of the women who do this work, and primarily women that do this work. If you're my three guys that I know that listen regularly, hey, how are ya? But it is really hard because you're exactly right. We haven't had these conversations before. We're getting better about talking about mental health. We're getting better at talking about perimenopause and menopause, but a lot of people, like you said, we just haven't been educated about this and neither have doctors. And so now
And
all
neither have
this
done.
knowledge is starting to come together of why are all these things happening. But the point is
Mhm.
there is help out there, no matter
Yes.
what it is you're going through. There is help
Yes.
available. There are people out there to help, like yourself, and other people. And I'm glad we have that because my goal here and the work that I do is I want women to have sustainable businesses. And the reason I want women to have sustainable businesses is not just for themselves, but it's also because of all the people that we help. We
Mhm.
are in a helping profession and we need to help the people that whose houses we go in every day. But in order to do that, we have to be good ourselves.
Mhm. And it's emotional. It's
Yeah.
an emotional, yes, to actually to go into somebody else's home, to be in their space and to be going through their things with them. Like, one, that takes an incredible amount of trust on their part, but also like it's an emotional, very emotional journey.
It is.
And we owe it to ourselves to be as healthy as possible going into that so that we can continue to do the things that we really want to do.
Yeah. It's an emotional and a physical journey. It's a very physical job. So it's all of these things, like everything we're talking about, like all really kind of it all tails together. It's really, really important. So is there anything that I didn't ask you or anything that you want to talk about?
No, I love that we talked about personal policies. I love that we
Yeah, that was
talked
great.
about I love that we talked about like the perimenopause stuff and some of
Yeah.
the research and then just like what is available to people because you don't have to like this is a great time. Like I loved every decade
Yeah.
and my 40s I really am I feel like I've learned so much just be as like an adult, part of me still feels like I'm, it doesn't I can't believe that I'm 46, like, part of me
I
can't
don't feel
believe
like I'm old enough to be as old as I am,
like
if that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I feel like women in this age group are amazingly dynamic. And I
Yes.
feel like we are really like, just talking to my mom about the menopause stuff, she's like, we didn't have any of this stuff
No.
when she went through
No,
it.
they
And
didn't talk about it at all.
Mhm. And we can at least go after it, I mean, there's a lot online. You can have consults online now, and so, I mean, it's at least there.
Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day, a friend of mine who's in my same ish age category, and we were talking about how when we turned 30, I will just say it, I was a brat when I turned 30, and not like the brat that is like brat summer, not the cool brat that we're
Not the
talking about
cool
now, the
brat.
dad brat, right?
Mhm.
And I was like such a jerk about it. And I just thought I was so old and it was all over for me and whatever. And I just remember like somewhere in my mid 30s, I'm like, oh my gosh, I love being in my 30s. This is great. And then I'm like, oh, my 40s are going to be like, oh, and then I'm like, "Oh, no, no, no. I love being in my 40s. It's fantastic." And then I turn 50 next year and I'm like, "Heck, I think I'm gonna love that too."
Happy
Like it
birthday. I think
Thank you
you
so
are.
much. Thanks. But, I just go like, "No, every decade, I feel like I'm able to say more about what I want and what I need, and we're able to talk openly about some of these things that we haven't talked about before, and it's just good. Like, embrace where you are." And I know that there are
Mhm.
people of all age ranges that listen to this, but just wherever you are, embrace it. Don't be a
Yeah.
brat when you turn 30 or 40 or 50 or any age. Just be happy.
And I think, we're here, right? Like, we're
Yeah.
we're here, and we can make this whatever we want it to be, and I think that's the take home message
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you for all this. Where can people find you on the great wide
on the great wide
internets?
web.
Yeah.
So they can find me on Instagram. I'm active there. I post at least once a day.
Oh, cool.
And Dr. Camilla Moore, the handles, DrCamilla Moore. You could find me there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. You just looked up my name and I'm there on LinkedIn. And that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. If you're interested in anything, just find me on Instagram, DM me, and we'll have a chat.
And we will put all of this in the show notes as usual. I always like to plug, just scroll down from wherever you listen to this podcast, and there are voluminous notes that give you all the things that you need. So you
Yes.
can just do a little click and you'll be right there. So, well, thank you for helping guide us so that we can guide our clients and just have better lives. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.